Welcome. I'm Kevin Miller. In this episode, why true connection is at the root of your happiness and how to truly connect. So Dr. Adam Dorsay is a licensed psychologist and an executive coach in Silicon Valley, where he serves people who they've achieved all the big trophies of life, in essence: money, status, possessions, power, and some of them fame as well. And yet they're coming to him for help. And why? After all these years, Adam's written a book to culminate the primary problems that he sees, and it's lack of true connection. So we're all out trying to win the world, and in the process, so often neglecting our soul. And we neglect the primary thing that gives us the most joy, happiness, and fulfillment, which is connection. And it may seem elementary to hear that, but so are most of the great truths of life that we miss. Adam finds there are actually 4 key areas of connection that we're missing, and it's taking the joy out of everything else. And it's connection with yourself, connection with others, connection with the world, and then connection with something greater. But you just can't hear that list and fix everything. You need to understand what connection really is, how we're missing it, and how to go about achieving it. Because we're all lacking connection in varying degrees, I believe, and we don't understand why, myself included, which is why I had Dr. Adam Dorsay come onto the show. I wanted to know more for myself, as usual. This is my own journey that you can participate in. And as you're about to hear, we discuss that, connecting with Adam, my eyes were just more open, especially in regards to the connection with myself, which I think is the most common thread of all my research on the human condition. Adam's book is called Super Psyched: Unleash the Power of the 4 Types of Connection and Live the Life You Love. He also has a podcast. It's the same name, Super Psyched. So you can go find that wherever you're listening to this show right now. So I invite you to join me as I talk with Dr. Adam Dorsay about how we can better understand and achieve this greatest asset for our lives: connection. Hey friends, my core devotion is finding deep fulfillment in life. That's my pursuit. And then I love to help others find theirs as well. So when I'm not on this microphone, I'm working with people as a life coach and often applying what fulfills them, finding that, honing in on that, and then applying that into their work and business. You can connect with me at kevinmiller.co or email me, kmiller@kevinmiller.co. So here are a few sponsors. They help make the show possible. Then drive with me and with Adam Dorsay, Dr. Adam Dorsay, to consider this aspect of why true connection is at the root of our happiness, and that we're all missing aspects of it, and how to truly connect. And let's see what we can learn for ourselves today. Adam, when your book came across my desk and I saw the aspect of connection, that's what first got me interested. And then going through it, it was an interest on a couple of facets. One, just, the overall concept looked really interesting, but it was really because I've had my own journey with good and bad connection. And so that's why you're here. Thank you for being here.
Kevin, I'm so happy to be here. And it sounds like you and I have a lot of common ground.
We do. And I want to learn more. The first thing that kind of popped into my mind as I started really getting into the book, I had Robert Waldinger on the show, and a lot of people know him. He's the director of the Grant study, the longest, what do they call it? Longest study
Cambridge
on human behavior.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
He's amazing.
On happiness. And, of course, what was the outcome? What it makes people by far and large over there, I don't know how many generations of study happy, and it's relationships. Okay. I got that. Love the message. Of course, I'm thinking, yeah, but it's not just any relationship. It's not crappy relationships that make us happy. It's the good ones. And so there I'm thinking, as I read through your book, I thought this is kind of how to do that, is the connection. Because without the connection, what kind of relationship do we have? Fair enough?
1,000,000%. And I'm thinking about the quality connections that we have, and the people who love us, the people who know us, the people who show us they know us, and how often we may even get distracted and try to impress people who aren't going to know us and who are not going to be kind of that Waldinger-like connection, and how much of our life force we waste on the people who aren't. So one of the things that this book is really trying to do is get people more intentional, more aware about how they're allocating their time, their most precious of resources, because we've got very little of it if you really think about it in the scope of history. So let's use that dash between our birth date and our death date. Do what Waldinger suggests, have high quality connections. We can't avoid some of the lesser quality ones from time to time, but let's really see how much time we can spend with the people who really get us.
I really want to start with the 10,000 foot view. You start off with a story that is not super unique, but it just set me back again. You start off talking about the couple, I think, you depicted them in Silicon Valley, and he's got the big job. He's got the credibility and the car and the house and whatever. And their kids are going to the highbrow school. And of course he is miserable. And it really, Adam, just got me stepping back again, kind of with the concept of what are we doing? What are we doing? Why are we? Because your story then is he's not real connected with himself. He's not real connected with his wife. He's not real connected with his kids. And from that, we can assume he's probably not real connected, not at a deep level, with the people he's working with. Is he connected with work? Is he connected with something higher? The dude's not connected. And it got me back to thinking, I'd rather just be in the bush somewhere with a bunch of natives in a community where we have no credibility, we have no status, we have no conveniences, but we just rely on each other, and we're sitting there eating some fruit and we're happy again,
Yeah. And you're talking about really a return to something really more primal in our nature. So many of us have various talents. I mean, I'm guessing, Kevin, that there are 100 paths you could have taken in this life. And some of them were really good bets on good money, and some of them were bad bets on good money. And when we're told, like, I'm really good at math, I'm really good at foreign languages, the smart thing for me to do would have been to have gotten an MBA and do international business. I might have enjoyed that. But my suspicion is I wouldn't have enjoyed it as much as what I am doing. And so many people end up in Silicon Valley because they were good at finance, they were good at tech, but they don't love it. They went to the right schools, they ascended the right kind of hierarchy at their company, made it to the C-suite, and they're using a talent of theirs, but it doesn't conform with a deep connection of who they want to be in this lifetime. They become, wow, I'm a CFO. That is me. It was something they might say. And in reality, they might be a poet. They might be people who want to live a more simple life as a yogi somewhere out in Indonesia, like what you were talking about. So really what this book is aiming to do is help people figure out, like, what do we want to do? What would be maximizing our use of this dash between our birth date and our death date?
Okay, it's curious. I'm thinking obviously about, I'm running through this, everything through the filter of connection. So what you just said, that concept of how we tend to get motivated to go towards what we are good at. You're a kid,
That's right.
You do well in math, you should go become an accountant, whatnot. And for a long time, it's been kind of a soapbox of, yeah, but you may not enjoy that. If you don't enjoy it, don't do it. But you have me focused on, kind of the connection aspect. So yeah, in school, I was great at ball sports, the football, baseball, whatever. I totally excelled. I did not connect with it. It just didn't connect. And I ended up going towards cycling, became a pro cyclist,
awesome.
A solitary sport that connected with me. And I like the different tact of not just, does it make you happy or not? Are you working at what you're passionate or what, but do you really connect with it, even though you made good? And I actually don't like that though. Help me out. You're the psychologist.
So
Go.
Yeah, I mean, Kevin, you nailed it. Andre Agassi hated playing tennis. He was good at playing tennis, but lo and behold, he got into meth at one point because he didn't love what he was doing. And he did make a heroic return and did have a great career. But in his book, Open, which I think is one of the great autobiographies, he described the fact that he didn't love tennis in as much as you didn't love ball sports. He was amazing at tennis and you were great at ball sports, but you found your home on the seat of a bicycle. And it took real courage to override something you were already good at and go with something else. And I'm guessing that you found something more consistent with what we now have referred to as the Ikigai. It's a Japanese model of 4 circles that is very predictive. It looks at the confluence of what are you good at, what do you love doing, what does the world need, and what will pay. Now, that's relative to our professions. Right. And many people are good at what they do, the world needs it, and they can get paid for it, but they don't love it. And that ends up being kind of it's the Sunday night shakes before Monday's big meeting. We all have experienced that to some extent if we haven't loved our work. And you have probably followed. Now, Kevin, I'm going to ask you a question. How have you been able to use that technology of leaving the ball sports and going to the bicycle in other ways of your life? I'm guessing there have been things that you've done where you have had to override what everybody told you should do and only to go into what you knew you had to do or what was good for you.
Yeah, I definitely like autonomy and being able to kind of go my own way, which, ball sports, there's a team. You got to be aware of the team. And the coaches get so irritated at me because I didn't pay attention to the other players as much. I didn't pay attention to what the play was supposed to be. Thank goodness I was strong and fast. And, finally, I'll never forget the football coach finally saying, Kevin, you don't pay attention. Just whatever. Just go tackle the guy. I go, okay. Yes, sir. Kind of like Forrest Gump. That's how I felt. But realizing that, and as I went into the workplace, that even in finding great opportunities that may have been a team, it's just not where I function most. And it almost feels I kind of feel bad saying that because, to say you're a bad team player sounds crappy, but there's a lot of people that excel in more autonomous places. But to your story of Andre, though, I look at that and wonder, what if the thing that we're best at or good at, again, we just don't internally connect with it, and we go over here and maybe we spend our time. Maybe I spent my time as a cyclist not being as good as I could have been in the ball sports, but I was just a lot happier. I really don't even like that concept, but what do you think?
Yeah. So the word connection has not even really been properly defined, and you experienced connection on the seat of a bicycle. Yeah. So this word connection, after doing about 20,000 hours of individual and couple psychotherapy, just keeps showing up. Everybody's like, I want connection. I want connection. It seems to be the precursor to everything we want. In interviewing well over 200 people on my podcast, all these thought leaders are throwing this word connection at me. And yet you look it up in the Webster's dictionary, it basically connects like 2 train cars or 2 things or 2 ideas or 2 people. You look it up in the American Psychological Association's definitions, there's not even a definition for it. And yet in our DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, if you look at all of the conditions, whether it's depression, a hallmark of it is not being connected with ourselves because we are ruminating about the past. Or with anxiety, we might not be connected to the present because we are future tripping, we are catastrophizing, we're worried. Yeah. When we're, experiencing trauma, we may dissociate. When we're having psychosis, we may be disconnected from reality itself. So at the heart of everything we don't want is disconnection, and yet everything we do want is connection. It hasn't been properly defined. So imagine you're at a party and you meet somebody for the first time and they give you a limp handshake versus somebody who gives you a vital handshake. Yeah. A limp handshake, it's just kind of like, it's like touching a dead it's like, ugh. Yet many of us live lives as limp handshakes. We're not really there while we're there. And the goal of this book was to help people connect with themselves, others, the world, and something greater. And the definition we came up with, and I say we because I actually enlisted nearly 10 other licensed mental health practitioners for me to create a working definition of the word connection. And the short answer is it's vitality. It is life force. It's what brings you alive. And you're not meant to be, in as much as certain dogs are more solo dogs and other dogs are more pack dogs, you are more of a solo practitioner. Doesn't mean you can't grow your capacity to be in team games, but you're probably going to want to maximize your strengths as being a solo dude. And that has been your strength. Think about any lead singer who made it better as a solo artist than they did in a band. Yeah. Prince was not meant to be in a band. He was a solo artist. Yeah. And thank God, because he would have gotten lost.
Yeah. What you're using, looking at that, I've thought about it for so long in the terms of, what gives you energy, what drains your energy. You can do that well, but it drains you. And you need to come over here and re-energize it. So I get more energy being I come over by myself, solitude and whatnot. But in this defining connection, one of the things that I appreciated in your book is you talked about it in relation to magnetic or electric.
That's
that
right.
one, the term that I've been stuck on for a while now is looking at it as an energy, source kind of thing, is resonance. Do I resonate with that? I mean, to some degree, I feel like, so you just popped up, on the screen. We looked at each other, we talked for a second, and you feel resonance or not. You feel a level of resonance. And when I look at the connecting, I tune in. I try to tune into that more and more. Who do I connect with?
Right.
Who do I resonate with? To be curious even about what is that environment or that music or that statement? Why did it hit me? And I'm just having faith that it just resonated. I have an energy, aspect to me. There is over here, and to be more accepting of what I connect with and to be more honest about what I don't.
Dude, I got to ask you this question. Remember when you started getting into music back in the day? Could have been around middle school. For many of us, it's around 12. I remember, AC/DC, Styx, Kiss, Foreigner, the whole thing. I don't know what generation you come from, but what was a song? I want you to name 2 songs. A song that you heard and you immediately knew, like, this is my jam. And another song that everybody else in your class seemed to love, but you didn't love.
Okay. First one that came up that I connected with was Journey. I mean,
which song?
Well, I mean, my gosh, Don't Stop Believing.
It's unbelievable, right?
Just unbelievable.
Stadiums stand up.
That album, I play it over and over and over. No idea that I'm resonating with it. But back in the day, I'm reading a book on my bed and I'm playing Journey. And then the ones that I felt like I should, the first one that came to mind was, and I don't want to diss him, but it was Dio. Do you remember that one?
Yeah, for sure. Ronnie James Dio, for sure.
Yeah. And I mean, it was kind of cool. And, my friends listened to it. I think
you wore the shirts.
Yeah. I bet I did. But it didn't connect with me.
So you're not throwing shades. Shots aren't being fired at Ronnie James Dio. He's got a big enough following. He's fine. Yeah. But what I'm driving at is many of us go through life pretending we're a fan of something we're not because we're told we're supposed to be.
Yeah.
And it ends up being a limp handshake lifestyle. It's the opposite of vitality. We know on some level we're full of crap. And I'm not talking about imposter syndrome where you're actually doing something you should be doing, but you have, this little voice inside your head that says, oh my God, who are we kidding? Because we all know that to do something great that could be truly authentic, we may experience imposter syndrome. I'm not talking about that. What I am talking about is when we say, I'm really into something and your entire body is saying, dude, you're not into this. This is a farce. Yeah, you're able to fake it because you're so damn good at it, but you don't love it. You don't wake. Let's imagine another scenario. You're waking up in the morning for a football game. You're eating your breakfast. You got out of bed on a Saturday morning. You're doing this. It's like you want to sleep, but you got a football game, you got to get to, and you don't want to let your teammates down. In your case, you're not going to be stoked to do that. But on the other hand, an early morning, Saturday morning ride.
Mm-hmm. Good.
Right? Mm-hmm. Can you imagine if most of our decisions conformed with the latter example? That's what I'm looking for. Vitality. And I think that hurt people end up hurting other people. Hurt people. When we do stuff that we don't love doing, we're more likely to displace our anger about what we're doing onto people we love. And when we're doing something we're stoked about, like, it used to be that Fridays was my podcast day. I now do it multiple days a week, but I'd pick up my son after doing a podcast. He's like, Dad, I love it when you pick me up after school after you've done a podcast. I'm like, oh, tell me more about that, kid. It's Bren who says, well, you're like you're always in a good mood, Dad, just generally, but you're in an unbelievably good mood after a podcast episode. And it's because there's a cognitive after image. After we do something we love, there are echoes of that thing. Now, I'm so sorry to the listener. when we to demonstrate cognitive after image, you're walking through Disneyland and unfortunately you happen to stumble by It's a Small World. And for the next 2 days, you hear this song in your head and it's just awful. Versus Don't Stop Believing. That's a nice cognitive after image. What I'm looking for is a cognitive after image for people. So we're going to be much more generous with other people, more generous with ourselves when we're doing something that's true to who we are. Kevin, I know for a fact that you are looking out at the beauty of Colorado right now, and there is more of you to go around because you've created that reality for yourself. It's not selfish to take care of our connection to ourselves. In fact, it's for the benefit of others.
I think, so I want to get into some of the specifics because I had some aspects of, I'm going to call it saving grace with connection. I grew up in a home that now that I look back was fairly tuned in to connection, connecting to what we did and connecting to good vibes, if you want to call.
I love it.
Positivity and whatnot. And so that kept me somewhat on course. I very much, if I could go back, wish that I had this cognizance of it so I would have better embraced connection, wouldn't have wasted time like you're talking about, trying to connect to things that I just did not. And then the other aspect of it is I would understand more about what connection really is. Because as we're about to get into, as I read through your message in your book, I realized I'm going to call it different. I mean, you've got different categories that we're about to go through of connection, but even in those categories, I'm going to say spectrums of connection. Some of them I nailed, some of them I totally missed.
Dude, 100%. And of course we missed, and it's trial and error, and we can't get on ourselves for what we didn't know. Maya Angelou once said, do the best you can. And when you know better, do better. Yeah. And the fact is you didn't have an iPhone in the 90s, I think because they didn't exist in the 90s. And you didn't also have that technology that you have now in your mind of, hey, does this bring me resonance? Yeah. So we can't grieve the past. All we can do is start planting trees now. As another Chinese, another proverb is, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is now. So all we can do is control the controllables. We can plant our trees now and be stoked as we watch them grow. My dad is 85, nearly 86 years old. He's still planting trees. He's hitting it hard. He's doing all kinds of cool things. Every year he's stretching. We now know that we can teach older dogs new tricks. My father has no talent, and he wouldn't mind me saying this, in learning Spanish. And yet he wanted it so badly because for him to feel vital, one of the things would be to have a conversation in Spanish. Now, his Spanish is not gorgeous, but it's intelligible. Would he get an A in class? No. But is he able to actually communicate in Spanish-speaking countries, having learned it later in life with no talent? And the answer is definitely yes. It's really cool.
Well, looking at this aspect of connection, and you separate it somewhat into 4 categories, and of course, categories within the categories. But right off the bat, again, Adam, you're here because you got me thinking in new directions. And there's been a long time when I said I connected to a lot of things well, but I was not connected with myself. Reading your book really showed me that's not true. I was connected to myself in some areas, just not in others. So I was connected to myself as far as what I needed to make me tick. I was connected to myself in regards to what I wanted. And that's my book. What Drives You is really focused at knowing what you want. Not that I've always been perfect, but fairly well. But then your first part of the connecting to yourself is knowing who you are, connecting with who you are. And that's, Adam, I missed it. I missed that one. I just did not. I looked at myself as I loved obviously competition and pushing myself and stretching myself. And that was true to me. I look at that now. I still enjoy that a lot. I looked at what I need to support that, what I need to be I'll call it, to be fully me, to be charged, to be lit. I mean, I always have been connected with that. but I kind of used myself as a tool. It was to get things done. I was my own worst taskmaster, and I was disconnected with myself. And I'll give this to you because you know it well. I really focus now on emotional intelligence because of my, really, I'm going to say emotional ignorance. I even had a hard time connecting with, did you stuff? Did you repress? I don't know. It's kind of like asking me, did I speak German or did I repress it? I don't know. I just didn't speak it. I just was so unaware. And in that aspect, I did not connect with myself. And that went on so long until I hit a significant burnout. I mean, it manifested. And that was one. So tell me about that. Cause I look at connecting to yourself and you separate that out, who you are, what you need, what you want. And I look at that and go, gosh, I think I did really well in a couple of them. Totally missed it in another.
100%. So just to relieve ourselves from some of the pressure, I'm going to borrow from the title of a book written by A.J. Jacobs. He wrote the foreword to my book. And his book was one of his many great books, was called My Life as an Experiment. And if we can think of our own lives as an experiment where we see what we connect with, try various things, as everybody's mom, including my own, said, try it, you might like it. She also said, the more things you're good at, the more opportunities you'll have in this life. Now, just being good at something, of course, is not a criterion on in and of itself, because we might not love it. But let's think about a ball sport analogy, and that is, strikes to balls ratio. Yeah. What we're looking, you and I probably had a lot of balls and fewer strikes in a good way. But we are hoping over time to connect more with the things we do and have a better strikes to balls ratio. We're never going to hit it. Everything's not going to be a win. We're not going to be connected all the time. And we're not going to truly know ourselves completely throughout our lives. We're not. There's going to be mysteries. Leonardo da Vinci once said, art is never completed, only abandoned. And that's kind of true about life as well. We will die unfinished works of art who knew and the job is to know ourselves better. 10% better, a few percent better. Let's take the pressure off. It's like people sometimes go on these, journeys and vacations or trips at certain stages of life saying, I'm going to find myself. I think that's a big ask. Maybe I'm going to find out a little bit more about myself would be a better ask. And the goal of this book is to help people find out more about themselves. And if you can think about the 4 as being an archery target, what I was looking at was connecting to ourselves as being the center because it informs all other connections. Connecting to others as being the ring outside the bullseye. So connecting to others might include connecting to your significant romantic others, my wife, of course, my children, the important people in my life. And I also included pets as others because many of us now know that pets are really others in our life, for not pet people. And my father could go through 5 lifetimes and never touch a dog and not give a crap. But for me, I can barely get through a day. So for me, they are significant others. The third realm is connecting with the world. That could include our work. It can include art. It can include nature. It can include our ancestry. And the fourth is something greater. For some religious people, it might mean their religion. For the most orthodox atheist, it might mean going to climb Pikes Peak, not far from where you are, and experiencing the grandeur of the world, the awe. Like, wow, look how big it all is and beautiful. I'm experiencing awe, something greater. So I looked at those 4 ways we humans connect. I could not find a 5th. So it seems that there are 4 basic ways. And to my knowledge, this is the first book to really look at connection as a topic in and of itself, as intrinsically meaningful currency, like in figuring out our own formulas as they relate to the 4 ways we connect.
Well, to that degree, again, and why we're having this conversation, when I looked at it, I don't want to look at anything as the holy grail of everything. This is tempting. This is tempting for me because at the end of it, as a human, I want to connect. Without a connection to something, I don't know what the point is. I remember a few years ago, it was probably with a show or something I was writing, and I had this concept. I like playing mental games of, if I woke up the next morning, and not some crazy dystopian thing, but it was just me. It's just me. The sun's shining, the birds are chirping, I mean, it's just world's kind of going on, but there's just nobody here. So I can do whatever I want. In my theoretical story, the sushi place is still open and there's still good sushi there. So I can go eat as much of that as I want to. I can go have tacos. I can watch a movie. I can drive some Lamborghinis around or whatever. But after about 24 hours, I'm thinking, what is the point? It was a big deal to me to go without somebody and something to live for. I have no point. And now with the concept or the perspective we're talking about, I'm thinking connection. We talked about purpose all the time, but what's at the heart of that? What's at the root of that? What's connection or happiness? What's that? Well, Waldinger says it's relationships. Well, what about the relationships? It's not the dysfunctional, crappy ones. Oh, it's the connection aspects, the things that we're interested to, music, movies, books, whatever it is. It's that resonance, again, that connection. And I'm feeling like, yeah, that's how have we not made that the primary focus? Like, okay, you're involved in these, but how do you connect? And you spend your time with a lot of people, a lot of high-powered folks that are doing lots of big things, culturally applauded stuff, and they're coming to see you though because they are, is that fair enough to say at some point they're just disconnected?
100%. So I'm really grateful to the field of positive psychology because it's put happiness and fulfillment under the microscope. And when we think about endless sushis and Lamborghinis, we're on basically in a hedonism cycle. It's called a hedonic treadmill. We can run that treadmill all the time, but it's going to be, it's wonderful. Don't get me wrong. We need some of that. But if that's the only thing that we're eating, it's basically like just eating Snickers bars all day. We are going to not really be very well nourished. But the quality of our relationships, and unfortunately in school, as well educated as we are, they didn't really teach us how to have good relationships. They kind of taught us, they tried, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. That's not true. Words actually hurt a lot. In fact, I'm sure that there's some words that you've received somewhere along this journey of life that still hurt, and they are decades old.
Sure.
And so that's patently untrue. And there's probably some physical pains that you've had decades ago that you're just like, whatever, I don't even care about that anymore. So we did not learn how to have good connections with ourselves, others, the world, or something greater. And the cool thing about you, Kevin, I can tell that you are a student of life. You're asking yourself, how can I stretch? How can I grow? How can I learn? And you're also looking at kind of what I call the Paul McCartney factor. And that is all of Paul's songs were about Waldinger's truth, love. It seems that Paul's songs in particular really got it right. He wrote about love all the time. And it could be love to a romantic partner, or it could be Hey Jude, where he's reaching out to Jude saying, hey, I see that your dad, John, is not as around as you might like. Here's a sad song. We'll make it better together. And being super psyched, by the way, does not mean being happy all the time. It means being connected to our psyches. So Paul got it right again. Hey Jude, take a sad song and make it better. Sometimes we need to grieve really hard. I've lost various pets in my life and various people. There are people who I've lost who I think about every day. But if I just try to be super psyched and just and repress the sadness, I'd be walking around with rocks in my shoe.
Let me ask you about that, Adam. Again, this is I'll take credit for a lot of growing and learning all the time. I get to be with people like you constantly, and I learn and grow, and so everything feels new a lot, which
That's awesome.
I really love. But on this aspect of what you just said, happiness, that keeps coming up. I love Robert. I love the focal point, and happiness is a good anchor of these points. But as a focal point, I'm struggling with it more and more. The last couple of years, I've had a lot of things happen. Had a dad who died suddenly, had some,
so sorry.
Had a daughter who kind of went off the rails, had the worst physical injury I've ever had it was very, very new stuff. The first time of real grieving. And I've gotten to the point now of feeling value from it. And I thought even recently, is happiness, is that my goal? I mean, I love that. I mean, today I sat out in my deck, working, the sun's shining, the wind's blowing. It's beautiful tonight. I'll have dinner with the family and lots of happy stuff. So it's great. But I think more than that, I just want deep fulfillment. And if that comes at the hand of hard stuff, of challenging endeavors, of grieving even, I think I'm okay with that. I mean, I don't want to be there grieving 100% of my day, but I think I've missed the value of allowing myself to feel those harder feelings. And I'm going to, well, in life circumstances, I haven't always experienced, a sudden death. I did now. And, I'm feeling the value. So I'm sure
That's amazing.
That.
I'm thinking about 9 Inch Nails and one of the lyrics within a song, the only thing that's real. We're looking for something that's real in this life. We're looking for something that's meaningful. We're chasing, we, as Michael Meade told me on my podcast, he said, we're not just Homo sapiens, we're Homo symbolicus. We are meaning chasing creatures. We are creatures that need meaning in our life. Viktor Frankl wrote a book called Man's Search for Meaning. He survived the camps at Auschwitz and lost everything and found a way to create meaning while he was there and afterwards. Now, that is the heaviest of Olympic sports I've ever heard of, trying to do it in that context. Not an easy thing. He was exceptional. The Mount Everest of...
well, let's hit that one, because Adam, I mean, again, you gave us these 4 areas of connection and you started off with self. Again, that has not been my strongest area of connection. It was actually, I don't remember, 4 or 5 years ago, I had Robin Sharma on the show, and I asked him about, it's back when I used to do this show on habits and kind of what your good habits are in life. And I asked him about relationships. Sure. And he said, well, my first habit is making a priority of relationship with myself. Adam, I had just never thought about it. Again, it was just a void in my life. Relationship with self. Dude, I'm just a tool. I have relationships out here, right, with all these things, with the world, with other people, with my work. I'm focused on those relationships. I never looked in the mirror. I don't look in the mirror and I'm irrelevant. I do stuff. That's where it started. So back to Frankl, and yeah, that's where he found his saving grace, is when he can't have a relationship he can't connect with anything other than himself. That was the core. So take it now to today's mental health crisis that we talk about. I mean, we look at chronic illness and disease, and last I looked, the diseases of despair was not the biggest, but one of the fastest growing areas in chronic illness and disease. Is it fair to say that at the heart of that, diseases of despair, apathy, depression, suicide even, is not a lack of connection with the outside world, because we're uber connected with, with social media and 1,000 things and what's going on around the world and whatever. But would you say, and is that why you have it first here, that probably the biggest disconnect we have is just right here looking in the mirror?
Yeah, it's a chicken and egg symbiotic relationship. Right. I mean, let's face it, if you're not connected with others, you're going to be pretty upset and pretty depressed and downtrodden and lonely. But also, if you are downtrodden and lonely and therefore non-magnetic, it's going to be hard for you to connect with others. So both need to be in place. We know that depression is a really big deal, and it manifests very differently for different people, including certain gender differences. Sometimes a really irritable, unpleasant person is actually deeply depressed, very often, in fact, and that's one of the symptoms of depression. And you just think, oh no, he's just mad. Like one of the guys walking through high school wearing the Megadeth shirt, saying, I don't need nobody, and blah, 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 blah. Driving up in the muscle car really loud, and they have this kind of hostile presentation. They are often people who are very depressed, and oftentimes they grow up this way, and you see them walking through the city, just still kind of walking around with a chip on their shoulder. Oftentimes it's untreated depression, loss, sadness, messages they got from their parents that just have not really been addressed. 2 groups of people. We'll take one group of people. A group of people who suffered both cancer and depression and recovered from each were asked, which would you rather have a recurrence of, the cancer or the depression? The vast majority said, I'd rather have the cancer back. The depression sucked that badly. And let's think about where, this is going to sound really whack, but I'm going to go there anyway. Think about historically, I can't talk about now, but historically our budget for NASA, exploring the outside, has been far greater than our oceanographic pursuits, or even just our geological pursuits. We, as Americans, like to look out there rather than in here. You go to more contemplative societies, and by the way, to great effect. We've become, an economic superpower. There have been some positive effects of looking outside. I'm watching Founder right now, the Ray Kroc story, a great American story of a guy who looked outward and employed those truly great American virtues. But we do it at the exception of being willing to look inside, and we need to do both. I'm not saying, join an ashram and do an endless silent meditation retreat. I'm an extrovert. I think that we need to fill, and each of us has different needs, in as much as each of us has different dietary needs. Somebody with celiac cannot be eating bread or gluten. Many of us can, and many of us would not prefer to live a life without it. So similarly,
what you said there just now about NASA and looking out, that we look out at space, it reminded me, my brother's really involved in the space movement and whatnot. And, we've got, a year or two ago, William Shatner, our Star Trek,
that was so cool what he did.
And he goes out, but I'm thinking about it in the reference to what you just said. And what was the big thing that happened when he went out of space? It was the overview effect. It wasn't going out into space and looking even further. He turned around and looked back home. And that's what rocked his world. And that's the overview effect. I hadn't thought about it.
And I think he said he felt lonely when he did so. Huh. And I'm super down with space exploration. I'm so excited about it all. I think it's great. It's just not it's quite possible that in the ocean exist many cures to many things that ail us, and we just haven't explored it. The fella, his name escapes me, the guy who found the Titanic, I saw him giving a presentation. If you remember his name,
I don't remember.
Yeah, really cool guy. Major props to this man. But he was saying he was the one who basically shared that our budget for deep sea exploration was really minimal compared to our outer space. Yeah, Robert Ballard. That's the guy. Amazing. I could listen to this man for hours. He was brilliant. But it caused me as a psychologist to think, and we tend to look outward more than we look inward. Okay, here's another really interesting thing. Americans, even in financial distress, will pay for dermatological and plastic surgical interventions, even if they have to do it on credit, because they want to look good on the outside. But they would not spend a commensurate amount to feel good on the inside. Interesting.
It's interesting. Well, I'm really involved in functional medicine, and you've got these docs who are devoted to ultimately to prevention.
Yeah.
But of course, we know who makes the most money. It's the surgeons. It's when they get paid to fix something that broke. You make the most money fixing what's broken. You make the least money keeping someone from breaking. It's just economy. It's true
amazing.
Story. Yeah. Well, your statement a minute ago too on depression, somebody who we would say they're disconnected in depression. Adam, I got hit years ago with a man that I really revered. He inspired so many, he's a pastor, inspired so many people. It's one of those beautiful stories of kind of a small town pastor, and he dies and people show up from around the world testifying to how he changed their lives, and just this incredible guy. Well, I found out then from his son that he had historically, most of his life, suffered from depression. Now, we never saw him as a depressed guy, but the reason it hit me, Adam, is I resonated somewhat with my own pursuit of inspiration. So I'm the super inspired guy. And I kind of at the time looked at it and go, man, am I also, not that it's all bad, I'm not throwing the baby out with the bathwater, but is some of my pursuit of this constant new and constant inspiration and constant growth, because I'm somewhat running from depression. And when I found that out, it's been since then, has been my journey to look in the mirror and actually figure out what I'm about and connect with self. Fair?
Fantastic. And I imagine that you had to knock down some clowns internally. I use the term knocking down clowns. It's kind of like when you're at the boardwalk or at a carnival and you can throw baseballs at a clown, which may be rigged by some of the folks who work there. But yeah, it's in order to even be willing to deal with that, it's very hard. We have to push through some internal stigmas and a host of other things. I've been depressed. I've been on antidepressants in the past. And so I've seen just how important it is. I call myself the Hair Club for Men guy as it relates to psychotherapy. I don't just treat anxiety and depression. I've suffered from both. So I really know firsthand what these things feel like and how much resistance we have to even trying to push past. I remember in my 20s, I was positive I had mononucleosis. The only explanation for my low levels of energy, it felt like I was actually cycling, and I could cycle at about a quarter of the capacity. I'd just gone through, a serious breakup, and I go to my doctor, and he just looks at me like, "Man, you don't got mononucleosis. You're depressed." And I was like, "What is that?" And I thought he was full of crap. He might as well have told me that, I could engage telepathically with other people. I mean, it was so far out, that this notion of depression, and he was entirely right.
Okay, so when you look back on that, do you relate that to a lack of connection? And if so, where?
For sure. Partner? Well, I was, at that point, I was, I guess, 24. I just had my first real breakup, real serious relationship. And if it was a lack of connection, it was a lack of the ability to really have the tools to know how to grieve. Like, I didn't really understand the volume of it all. I didn't understand that sadness was a thing that would come and go. That whole idea of King Solomon in the ring and this too shall pass, we were in on the ring. I didn't understand that I thought the feeling was going to last forever. I thought I was always going to be that way. But not having the wisdom of age, having more trips around the sun to know, what, this is going to suck for a minute, but you're going to be all right. The sun is going to come back. Yeah. And you will be able to ride on the bike at your full capacity at some point. Just chill for a minute. I remember when I used to boogie board when I was a kid, and I used to get knocked silly, and I couldn't even tell which way was up. And one of the things I learned was, because we're buoyant creatures, I could just put up my right hand and feel for air. And what I needed to do was regulate and just slow down my heartbeat, relax, and trust that I would find the surface. I wasn't doing any kind of Laird Hamilton crazy big waves. I was doing, like 3 to 5-ish foot-ish waves. It would be okay. And that's a good metaphor for when we get tossed off life and we go through one of life's transitions. We will find our way back. Even people who go through dire things like amputations, even they tend to find their way back on average. So, and there are tools out there. There's therapy, there are groups, there are people to talk to. There are self-help books, there are podcasts like this.
There's your book as a
There's
tool.
My book.
I got a question for you on, so, looking at my connection with myself. So, so many things that I did connect with, but I didn't internally. I didn't, self-compassion. I didn't understand that boundaries. I didn't have I actually built myself onto a Superman complex. No limits, exactly. No excuses. Great as a pro cyclist, not so great in other areas of life. So as I was reading your book, what struck me and what I wanted to bring to you is the areas of myself that I didn't connect well with. So my own void, my own blindness, my own disconnection with myself. What I'm seeing, and I'll just throw it to you, is that's the same problems. Those same problems of my disconnect with myself or lack of connection with myself are the exact same problems that I had in what your next level is connecting to others. I just brought the same issues forward.
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. That's how that chemistry or the math works.
Well, that's what it was. So I was I am an introvert, but I can extrovert very well. I can
I can
connect with
tell.
people. I ask questions like this. This has always been me, and I can be charismatic, and I connect with people in what they often feel, and I sure did, was a deep way, in that I do like to talk about thoughts. I like to talk about ideas. And within those, I'm pretty wide open and vulnerable. What I didn't realize is, just as I was ignoring my feelings, my emotions with my relationship with myself, I didn't bring those into the relationship with others,
Mm.
which some of my family members can tell you, very acutely about that. It wasn't even anything negative, like I was pushing it away. I just didn't really exist in that plane. So I didn't connect with people on an emotional level. So when you get into a significant other, that's pretty significant. And that ultimately, manifests. My kids, we talk about it now, that I wasn't there for that. And they would say, I had one of them say, yeah, Dad, if we, have something wrong, we need a compassionate shoulder to cry on. That's Mom. We need something fixed, we come to you. You're still a good guy, but we got, but I thought, so is that ring true, that my story there of what I lacked with myself is what I brought over here, and it was the same disconnect with everybody else?
Well, I think you and I were probably both taught, don't pay attention to yourself. That's
Sure.
self-indulgent. Our job is to be Superman. And I remember wanting to be the guy on the white horse. You remember Richard Gere in Pretty Woman, how he shows up in the limo and he's like, we all want to be that,
yeah.
How far did you go in school, Richard Gere? He went all the way. And so it was like, we all want to be this guy who rescues Rapunzel from the tower, or is Superman, or whatever it is. And there is a lot of virtue to the intention. The problem is the execution sucks, because we spend no time actually asking ourselves, like, yeah, and who am I? We can still be rock stars and carry a lot on our backs, but we also have to pay attention to those backs, otherwise those backs break, and then we're useful to nobody, and we might even become not only not useful to others, but we might actually become harmful. So we've seen it in professional sports, where people end up doping just to get the right results, because all they're thinking is the external result, not thinking enough about the process to getting those results. That is Machiavellian by any means necessary.
Let me ask you, I got a question on that, Adam. I think it was, gosh, if I've got it right, Arthur Brooks. So Arthur's been on the show a couple times, and it was probably, I think it was with his Strength to Strength book, and the message there that we got to talking about happiness. And there was a study, maybe you know it, and I'm trying to bring it to mind, but a study they did with some certain athletes, and they were asked if they lost like some timeline of life, would they trade it in for a better performance, a gold medal? And that the majority of them said, yeah, they would take the gold medal.
1,000,000%.
Okay. Well, so back to what you're saying, because I'm thinking kind of back to the beginning of the story, or beginning of your book, and the story about the couple, and they've got all the stuff, and yet the dude is miserable. And I'm thinking, at the end of the day, we're talking about connection. Would we choose, well, let me own it. Would I choose connection with myself, connection with others? Let's exaggerate it. And I'm living in the bush in Africa somewhere, with my little community. And there's happiness, and there's, music, and we spend our days going to get water and hunting and gathering and doing that and come together, kind of the consummate little fairy tale of that. Would I take that and to have back to deep fulfillment, deep connection, deep relationship? But I have no worldly credibility. I have nothing to show. I got nothing but a loincloth, man. I don't have the car. I don't have the house. I don't have credibility. That's a big question. And I know your message is not either or.
Definitely not.
But I'm looking at do I value it or not? Because it does take, your book doesn't just give us a little treasure chest and said, oh, boom, here it is. You're connected. It takes work. To get connected, I am going to have to make some changes.
Right.
I'm going to have to do the work.
That's right. And oftentimes there is a bit of a barrier. Oftentimes, like, let's face it, on a Saturday morning, you want to go cycling, but that means also waking up early. Your body might want to sleep. It also might mean going out in the cold. Your body might not really be into it. So there may be certain costs, barriers to entry, activation energy required to do the awesome thing. And oftentimes we're not willing to pay the price. Most of us aren't. And what I'm going to ask people to do is reconsider those costs. Like the ROI that you derive from pressing on and getting on the saddle, waking up early, getting out there, facing the cold, pumping up those tires, doing all the prep that's required, getting the adequate hydration and proper attire, and getting on that saddle of that bike and powering through. And the first few minutes of cycling, you and I both know, suck because you're kind of getting the cobwebs out. And usually at around minute 10, we feel pretty good. And then at some point, we build up some lactic acid and ask ourselves, why didn't I just stay at home and just, watch Netflix? And then on the other side of the ride, you say to yourself, that was awesome. Totally worth the cost. Now, that's a very different cost than saying, a Faustian bargain where I will give up my life in order to get the results to make me, immortal in sports. No one's immortal in sports. Very few. I mean, Muhammad Ali, Michael Jordan, okay, I got it. But try to name the last 10 NFL MVPs. Try to do the same in the NBA or MLB. You're not necessarily going to know them. Who won Best Actor 5 years ago at the Oscars? It's a night. It's a moment. And for many people, it's career defining. But it's not all defining. I was the MVP, perhaps, you could say, but not this year. And in fact, they will be remembered as the OGs, the GOATs, but there's so much more to who we are. People want to be loved for who they are, not what they did.
Well, let's go to cost then. I mean, again, your story, and I'm not trying to polarize worldly success with connection, and it's one or the other. And I know that's not
exactly.
Cool.
You can do both.
You can do both.
Steve Kerr definitely does both.
Okay, and you're probably going to need to question things. So if we take the story that you start the book off again with the guy who's working, I think he's like 70 hours a week, and he's got the job, it demands it. He hardly sees the kids. If he is home, they're off doing their extracurricular stuff because they're, again, at a highbrow school to do what? To get themselves into a position like he's in. Oh, so we're breeding them to be where does he want them to be where he is?
Exactly. It's just a machine, huh?
Just a machine. He's just a tool. Back to my thing is I'm treating myself like a tool. And to that, I'm looking and going, it probably is no different than like the finances. If you want to have, Dave Ramsey's an old family friend. He's saying, well, if you want to get out of debt and have more money, you got to live like no one else if you want to live like no one else. So you may not go out and spend the money that everybody does for a while, or you may look to work to make extra income and not have the free time that other people do. You're going to have to do something different. So like in the story with your guy, whether it was, I assume probably based on a lot of real patients, clients that you've had, that there was something that did need to tactically change. I mean, if there's no time to connect, there's no time to connect. What's going to change? Something in there from let's call it an external aspect, literally has to change. And you're going to have to start doing like you said, if you want to get well, you got to exercise. I mean, it's just going to have to happen.
For sure. So, I remember hearing a comedian. I'm a sports fan. I particularly love watching the NBA, but I love watching the NFL, I love MLB. I love it all. But I heard a comedian once say something that changed my life. He said, when you watch your team and you yell, we win or we won, it's not true. Actually, the guys on the field won and they got a lot of money. They burnt a bunch of calories. What did I do? I got fat and sat and watched them. Now, I'm not throwing shade on being a sports fan. I am a sports fan and I will join you with a beer in hand and scream to the point where I'll lose my voice. But if we do that at the exclusion of playing our own sports, if we do that at the exclusion of creating our own legends, so I say create more, consume less. A lot of us doom scroll, check out the news, go on social media, watch passively other people living their best lives. I'm saying we need to create more. Creating, by the way, is not just, doing ceramics and art. I'm talking about get in the saddle of your own bike and create new muscles, create more phototherapy by being out in the sun, create more oxygen in your body. And so that when you get home and you shower and you look at your body and say, wow, I just worked out. I just created new muscles by breaking some down. I created relationships because I rode with a buddy. That's amazing. It could be that I spent time writing. It could be, you creating this podcast right now. But create more, consume less is my newest axiom.
Creating has become a more and more common focal point in my own work, realizing that actually I had the discussion a couple days ago with one of my daughters. She's 24 and art is her thing. Now, I think we all can create. It doesn't have to be the visual arts, but
absolutely.
But creating, man, when it comes to feeling personal progress, satisfaction, again, back to deep fulfillment, it's hard for me to not put creating at the top of that list.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And by the way, when George and Jerry are at the diner talking about, whatever they're talking about, they're creating as well. When you're in an improv class, you're still creating, doing something. We are meant to work together. That's why the Amish community, when they do those barn creations in a day, those are awesome. And guess who? I just read something really interesting, by the way, just a super side note. Apparently, one of the best sleeping societies is the Mennonite Society. And I could be wrong, but this is what I read from a very authoritative source. They live in close proximity to each other. And something about living in close proximity kind of rings Waldinger in a way. Like, we want to be close to others. For those of us who've had good experiences at sleepaway camp, we didn't have Jack and the food sucked, but we had each other, and we had each other. And that's a lot. I guess that's a Bon Jovi line, but we had amazing experiences at camp. And when camp was over and real life, quote, real life began again, it was a mourning period for many of us who'd done this, had really good sleepaway camp experiences. We can have this, by the way, in college. We can have this when we do a project with a group that we really love. Sometimes the project itself kind of sucks, but it's the group. Like, I remember when I was on a committee to hire the new head of school because I was on the school board. Really hard situation. Oh my God, did I bond with my committee? And we were actually stoked when we made the hire, and we were sad when we had to disband.
That I was going to say, Adam, having a community is one thing, but having a shared experience is what you're talking about.
Exactly.
Going through something. Because I see some people, I grew up, you go to church all the time, and I can go to church for a decade with the same people, and we just are acquaintances. You say hi in the foyer,
exactly,
whatever, and you go on. Different than, you go on a road trip with 5 people, and after about 24 hours, dude, you are bonded. You got some shared context, and we don't have that. And it's interesting you mentioned the Amish. So my grandparents, my dad's parents, they were both born Amish. So, and then retained their place in the Mennonite, the Amish and Mennonite culture.
That's so cool.
Mennonite pastor. So I grew up going up to Ohio, and we spent a lot of times on the Amish farms with those families, with the schoolhouse, with the couple who had 18 kids. I saw the barn raisings. I saw that. And they're, good and bad to any culture. But that aspect of it, man, community and relying on each other that we do not have at this point, I think we've lost something vital in our connection. And I think that brings us into connection. I mean, your third aspect in here is connection to work, community, art and inspiration, nature, ancestry and tradition. I mean, you mentioned the Amish. Dude, they got all that.
They got all that.
Part of the package.
Yep.
And we don't. We're disassociated in all those, and in some aspects don't. And we've got a lot of people these days. Everybody works probably. Do they have community? That statistically, a lot of people don't. I had Connor Beaton. He runs Man Work. I can't remember, but he leads men's groups, and his stat was, back in, I'm making it up, 1984, something like that. The average guy had 4 or 5 friends, people he called friends. Today, it's 1.
That's right.
And my experience is that one friend is not near as close as back in the day, the 4 or 5 friends. That a lot of us, we don't have community. You've got art and inspiration. I think a lot of people aren't connecting with that at all. Nature, we know that more and more people are in the big cities, no connection to nature. Ancestry and tradition, I think, again, man, the majority of that whole section in your book we're missing, as you know. That's why it's in your book.
And, that's why I gave my second TEDx talk on friendship and adulthood. I was working with a whole bunch of people. They were perhaps born in Ohio, educated out in the East Coast, had their first job in Texas and then ended up in the Bay Area where I am now. Each of these places, they had friends. And each of these places, they swore they'd stay in touch with their friends. And now they look at me in their 40s or 50s and say, man, I have no friends. I mean, sure, yeah, my kids have some friends and I hang out with their parents, but they're not the people I would choose. And it's been so sad, but friendship has really taken a massive hit. We have all these friends on Facebook. Some of us have thousands of friends on LinkedIn and blah, blah, blah. These are not friends. Yeah. A friend is someone you can call at 3 a.m. and say, dude, it just went down. I need to talk. And they show up. And there are different friends for different things. Esther Perel talks about the fact that we used to live, just like you were talking about, in these smaller, tight-knit societies where we had people to serve different needs. We had somebody we, farmed with, somebody we went fishing with, somebody we played cards with and got drunk, somebody that was filled basically every role imaginable. Now we look at our spouse and say, fill all of those roles, please.
Totally. Yeah.
And as Morel said, it's too much for the relationship. And I agree wholeheartedly. So for the sake of your primary romantic relationship, if you have one, it's really important that you also have friends to dissipate some of the energy. My wife is not going to watch the Golden State Warriors with me. And I wouldn't want her to because she wouldn't enjoy it. And she won't watch Lord of the Rings, nor would I want her to watch that either. I love both things. And she likes some things that I don't like. And there's thankfully most of the things that we both like are that we have a lot in common.
That one to me, Adam, is huge. And I found myself, I experienced it in my own, marriage and realized the propensity for us to rely on each other for everything. And it wasn't until I started hanging out with the guys and realized my wife can't relate to me as a father. She's not. She can't relate to me as a guy. She actually is just not a guy. I can't relate to her if she wants to lament about pregnancy. I never carried a child in my belly. I mean, there's so many things. And I thought, again, back to the Amish, concept, you've got siblings, you've got aunts and uncles, nephews and nieces. You got so many people to glean from, to turn to for those different things. And now we're isolated. We look to each other. And I felt like, it's setting us up for failure. The amount of pressure I'm going to put on my wife to try to relate to me in every way. And it really was a specific time when I started going and doing guy stuff, one, and two, going and having time of solitude, just myself. We got to the point of getting away from the kids as a couple, but I never had time by myself. And the first time I kind of did after so many years, it was like plugging into the charger. Holy smokes. I had you were talking earlier, can't remember the reference. And I remember one of my boys, I was at the dinner table. I must've been being grouchy or something. And he said, Dad, I think you need to do one of your getaways.
Oh,
love that he saw that. He saw that. And I wasn't, I was still missing it, but man, I think you're, again, the point. Now we're saying this and I understand it's hard for people to hear this and resonate and go, how do I do it? I don't have the 7 steps to creating a community or friends.
Well, I'll give 2 tips. One
Please.
About self and one about other. What I would ask people to do is ask themselves, what is something that they used to love doing that they kind of let go by the wayside? Life just got in the way. That would be thing 1. See if you can reestablish a connection there. Thing 2, look through your contacts. Ask yourself, who is somebody with whom I had an amazing connection and I let it go and I'm a little embarrassed to reach out, but what if I was to power through the embarrassment and say, I dropped the ball if you did, or maybe they dropped the ball and you're pissed, but maybe, as Sade says, love is stronger than pride. Maybe you reach out anyway and say, hey, listen, let's meet up, whether it's in person or virtually. And people say, oh my God, I'm on Zoom all week. I don't want to do it. When you're on Zoom or meeting virtually with somebody who's awesome, it's a different experience. My buddy Jed, I love this man tremendously. He's the brother I never had, the little brother. He lives in New Jersey. I saw him over the summer and it had been 9 years. If we continue at this rate, I will see him 5 more times before I die if I live a very long life. That's not acceptable. I'm committed to seeing him once a quarter via Zoom. He and I will have a beverage of our choice, we'll say, and we will see each other, and it will not be the same as seeing somebody for a business interaction via Zoom.
Did you ever see the movie? It was like Tag or something like that, and it was about
Tag.
What's that?
Yeah.
Based on like 5 guys that every year they go tag each other. They've been doing it for 30, 40 years. And I love that. I love the depiction of that, the power of that relationship from a once a year, at least, face-to-face connection.
So crucial.
So crucial. Well, you have then kind of the anchor to this, connecting to something greater. Now, I come from a very religious background that I don't claim the same aspect of religion, but I do from a spiritual aspect, prominent place in my life. And I've concerned myself in recent times with, again, going back to chronic illness and disease, and especially the diseases of despair and depression and apathy and what we've been talking about. And as we have, I heard recently then when asked about, I don't know if the question was asked about religion or spirituality. It might have been religion, but the number one fastest growing answer is none.
Exactly.
None.
That's right.
And I thought from a religious standpoint, I kind of get that. I've got my own frustrations against, organized religion, especially here in America and whatnot. But it did bother me in regards from a spiritual aspect that it feels like culturally less and less of a connection to anything greater than. And to me, I'll just admit, that scares me to death to think that it is just me, that my focal point is just me. Yeah, again, regardless of the religion, even you, as you said, atheist, fine. I know a lot of people who are atheists who are heavily devoted to humanity, to the environment, to animals, to whatever. There's something aside from themselves that they heavily invest in, and I see it as a spring of life. So I do heavily question, I'm concerned about a lack of connection to something greater. Thus, I love that is, I'm going to call it the anchor in your book. Tell me what you're seeing.
So, my man, I love this. Let's think about the blue zones, the places where people live to be 100 more likely than average. 2 of them are Okinawa and Loma Linda. In Okinawa, the people meet with what's called a moai. They meet with a common purpose. And the beauty of religion, regardless of what your religious leanings are, as long as these are not like religions of hate, which I don't really don't exist too much. But certain cults do, and those are really scary. But assuming it's a kind, loving community with values that are consistent with your own, meeting with a common purpose is really one of the biggest benefits of the religion in and of itself. I remember growing up, going to my synagogue, and it was thriving. You go back today, it is dying. There are very few people there. The people who are there tend to be substantially older. Now, what was nice about going as a boy was I felt the presence of a community having my back. Yeah. And I'd have these micro connections that were really nice. I'd see Mr. Bromberg, who was like my favorite guy in the world. I'd see Alex Bauer. I'd see all these people there who would give me just a little bit of love, even just a smile. And I felt like, oh, I'm not alone. And that's part of the reason why I believe, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that when the Amish people reach a particular age, they are told to go back out into the real world, and the vast majority of them return, even having to say goodbye to the technological and sociological things that they got out there in modern society. They come back to feel affiliated. And so we need to meet with a common purpose. At Loma Linda, it's the Seventh-day Adventist community where they eat well, and they also have a real value of converging. we need to converge again. We need to meet with a common purpose. Bowling alone, bowling alleys, they used to be all over the place. And now we see that bowling alleys are dying out. Social, Lions Club, Kiwanis Club, Rotary Club. We need to keep these things going. It doesn't matter what the roof is, but we need to converge with a common purpose. Something good, something positive.
Well, and let me ask that again in reference to your chapter here on, because we can come together from a common purpose of, how can I exaggerate the point? We dig sports. And so I've got
for sure
a poker group. I know guys in my area who have a poker group, whatever. But now you also are putting, I'll ask, I feel like you are putting a greater emphasis on having that common purpose be something that we do view as, again, you say greater than self. And it's hard for me to separate that from a spiritual aspect, but I know some people do. Again, somebody who may reject spirituality, but they say, man, I am devoted to humanity and human rights and whatever. And they have their groups there that have that common purpose. And that common purpose is something that they feel a great connection to,
right?
And a great purpose in. Fair?
100%. And poker night is fantastic. And for some people, that's actually enough. For some people, that is enough. As Britt Frank, who I know you and I both like very much, she says some of us have different friendship frequency needs. She kind of talks about the schedules of feeding for two different animals. There's the hummingbird, and I can see one right outside my window right now, and he's eating. They eat all the time. And some people need to see their friends all the time. And some people don't need to meet as frequently. Apparently scorpions eat less frequently. Like I forget the frequency, like once a month, let's say. And we need to know how much frequency we need and what types of engagement. Not everybody needs the same levels. I remember Joey in Friends, he was in it, just seemed like he was in every scene. And Ross seemed like he was a little bit more distant. And yet they both got their friendship needs met by the same group. Just the frequency was different.
I've seen that so acutely, Adam, because I have a big family. I got a lot of kids, and I got one right now, and she is insatiable and just loving this big community of friends in the performing arts world. And she goes with this group of friends and this group of friends, and she's just so enjoying it. And I've got a son who has a friend.
Exactly. One-on-one.
Yeah, both very fulfilled. They are connected, real connected, but very different. So again, coming back to understanding, I appreciate that. That's probably a relevant point to hit on here, that the connections are not all the same. You do a good job of that in the book. You're not saying everybody should be connected and it should be in this way. You're saying, no, you need to be connected, but just as you said, the ways may be very differing. So if you understand that, which again brings me back to, then where does it start? How do you know? Chapter 1 or 2, or whatever, part 1, knowing yourself.
Comes right back to Ronnie James Dio versus Journey, and knowing it, and like asking yourself, like, is this the formula for me? And each of us has a different formula. Dio is a totally legitimate band, not your band. Journey, and by the way, I agree with you 100%. That album Escape, oh my God, that was a great album. And all their stuff. I mean, Journey is just like, it's so fantastic.
I think it's part of my DNA. I think it literally took root in my genetics somewhere.
Oh, dude, for sure. Oh my God, Steve Perry and the guitarist, who's, just amazing. I remember them so well, and they were so formative in my youth. So you and I grew up on that.
Adam, I appreciate the focus. That's why I wanted to talk with you. It got me just more focused on. I think you're right. I mean, why is there not a book out there? Has not been until now, on connection, on the specifics of connection. We know that we want relationships. Again, back to Waldinger, we know relationships are the key for us. But what kind of relationships? And at the end of it, the point is how we connect.
That's right.
Not just because we can't just say relationships, because a lot of people out there dying in bad relationships, but it is an aspect of connection. But then how do you do it? And man, I just appreciate your stories, your analogies, the the grace of understanding the different types of connection, even as you are saying though, but we do need to be connected. Start with yourself and expand out there. So I love the message, man. It's been a gift to me, and I'm honored to bring it to everybody who listens to the show.
Kevin,
so thank you.
This has been a blast. I've loved getting to know you, hear your questions. You're really very good at this, so it's no surprise that you've had some really good guests, and I'm just honored to be one of them. So thank you, Kevin, for doing what you're doing, for bringing these messages, including my own, to your listeners.
Well, I'll just say thank you for the opportunity to connect with you. Thanks.
Right back at you, bro.
Friends, thanks for joining us on this drive. That is, again, Dr. Adam Dorsay, actually, Dorsay. I appreciate him coming onto the show. Again, his book that was my reference point for this discussion is called Super Psyched, Unleash the Power of These 4 Types of Connection and Live the Life You Love. And again, his podcast is the same name, Super Psyched. You can find him there and check out some of his episodes. Got a comment or question for on this episode, on this topic for me, myself, or Dr. Dorsay, you can connect with me at kevinmiller.co or just shoot me an email, kmiller@kevinmiller.co. Until next time, I hope this episode helps you drive further and most of all, enjoy the ride.
Yeah.